It is rare that I have a guest back on the show within a few months of that guest appearing beforehand. I want to give everybody some breathing room, but I've been having conversations about conversations. I've been going through some stuff in my own circle, and I've been watching this big Joe Rogan dust up with RFK Jr. and Dr. Peter Hotez, and this sort of demand for debate, a bait for debate me or else kind of thing. And so I want to talk about discussions. The first person I thought of was the guest I had on earlier this year. It's Melanie Trecek-King, who is an educator, and she is the founder of thinkingispower.com. Melanie, so glad you came.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's really an honor.
Okay, first I want to start off with this whole ghost thing. And this is unrelated, but I would love to stay in a haunted house. I don't necessarily believe in ghosts and spirits and apparitions and phantoms, but I don't care. I've been watching your social media feed. You have stayed or been staying in a haunted house, or houses plural. What's that about?
So that was such a fun opportunity. I have a good friend, Kenny Biddle, who is the world's only full-time paranormal investigator at the Center for Inquiry. And he actually used to be and pardon the air quotes, but a ghost hunter, like the TV kind that you would see. And wanted to go stay with him. And he mentioned staying in a haunted house. And I said, I want to see what a ghost hunt looks like. No, I want to see what a paranormal investigation looks like and how that's different than a ghost hunt. And so there's a supposed haunted house out there. It's called the Hinsdale House in rural Western New York. And we rented the house for the evening. And my husband and Kenny and I spent the night in the house and had a nice tour of it, heard the ghost stories from the person who was letting us in. Actually, the forest was supposedly haunted too. So we went up into the forest to check things out. The story goes in the 19th century, early 19th century, there was a pair of brothers that, again, this is according to lore, but they were on the stagecoach route, and they robbed and murdered nearly 90 people and buried them on the grounds. And in the 70s, there was a family that lived there, and they reported all kinds of paranormal experiences and even had a priest come in and give an exorcism of the house. And since then, no one's lived there, but it's been a place where people have gone to experience paranormal sightings.
Okay. Well, forgive the digression, but I love ghosts. I would love to stay the night in one of I hate the word murder house, but that's kind of what a few of them are. Maybe it's tacky, where some horrible thing happened, and now they hang a shingle out front and stay for only $400. You can sleep over. I mean, maybe that's tacky, but I would kind of do that. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about, I want to start here before we get into Rogan and everybody else. I think you posted something on thinkingispower.com or on the web page, or on the Facebook page rather, about the world being gray.
Yeah, my graduate professor used to always say that the world wasn't black or white, it was shades of gray. And that's really struck me and stayed with me. So binary thinking is simple. It's easy, it's seductive, it's clear, this or that. You can be confident and certain in what you think that you know. But reality doesn't work that way. There's lots of shades of gray. And so one of the first things with critical thinking is to get students to, and I say this all because I'm an educator, but to get students to understand that knowledge isn't black or white. It's not like you know something or you don't know something. I mean, certainly some things are more certain than others, but literally put on a spectrum. Start with, this is what I think is true, 0 to 100%. How sure am I that that is true? And then get them to understand that those extremes are probably something that we want to avoid. So scooch in, and then with new evidence, be able to move how certain we think that conclusion is. And a lot of extremists tend to see the world in these black or white terms. And then they add in tribalism, us and them, good, bad, black or white, where if we want to solve problems, it behooves us to understand them. And to understand them, we have to realize that it's not that simple, right? The other team, the other side might be right about something. We might be partly wrong about something. It is almost certainly true that you're not absolutely right about everything. So the question is, what is it? And it starts with not being so confident in what you think you know.
Yeah, but isn't there something that we can be confident about? Right now, there are people hammering out the angry email, right? I am confident that Nazis are bad and that what they represent is evil or awful or horrible. So, I mean, are there times when you do draw the line and say, I am right and I can say that with confidence?
I mean, yeah, the joke that I give my students in class is always, well, we could be living in the Matrix, right? So it is true that there are some things that I am much more confident in others. Look, Nazis, bad. Yes, I'm confident about that. But most situations are not that. Oftentimes, and again, not always, but oftentimes that's used to shut down a conversation by associating someone with Nazis or Hitler. It's an easy way to not have to make a cogent argument. And so it's mostly a cop-out. There are times where it would absolutely apply. But I think that if you have to get to that point, then it's probably not a conversation worth continuing anyway.
Well, we do it because we need the other to be the worst. And here's an example. We had a massive storm with 100-mile-an-hour winds blowing through at midnight one night. It knocked out power in 200,000 homes. We had $100 million worth of damage. We had buildings destroyed and trees ripped out from the roots, and it was just crazy. And I had some damage at our home. We had this privacy fence, and it blew the fence over, a big portion of the fence. Well, my neighbor is over here. He is a MAGA conservative Republican. I mean, just right out of the book, right off of Fox News, right? But he saw that my fence was down. He said, I can't work today. I got the whole day. I'm doing nothing else. Looks like you could use a hand. Let me grab some tools and let me come over and we'll fix your fence today. And that guy spent all day in 93 degrees side by side with me to solve my problem. And it wasn't about politics. We didn't speak about our philosophies about the world. He was just demonstrating goodness. Now, if I had seen him on paper, right wing, evangelical, MAGA, conservative, I might have written him off wholesale.
Yeah. So there's a lot in there. I'm reminded of the Brene Brown quote. I don't know if you're familiar with Brene Brown, but she says something to the effect of, people are hard to hate up close, so move in. And online, there's a separation, right? There's a distance. You're almost anonymous, behind a keyboard. And so people display behaviors that they wouldn't in real life. But actually, I'm reminded of, I don't know if you're familiar with Henri Tajfel's work from the mid-20th century on group dynamics. And he was a product of the Holocaust, and he saw how horrible the Nazis had treated the Jews. And so he set up some experiments to try to figure out, it was clearly an us versus them, but how different do groups have to be before one group will start to discriminate against the other group? So he had people in, and he randomly gave them a series of dots on a screen and asked them to estimate how many dots were on the screen. And then he grouped them into either overestimators or underestimators. And his goal was to figure out, if I establish this minimal group paradigm, how many more layers will I have to go before I get to a point where they will start to discriminate against the other group? And the twist in the experiment was that he randomly assigned the groups to over or underestimators. So even as something as banal as how many dots are on a screen, they were still randomly assigned to this group or that group. And he found that even at that condition, the groups would discriminate against each other. They would actually take less for their group if it meant the difference between the two groups was greater. So it is now called the minimal group paradigm. And to me, what this says, and what I see in your story, is that we have our tribes based on our identities. We have our groups based on shared characteristics that we think are important. But as soon as those groups change, as soon as we establish a shared identity, then we can connect there and be on the same team.
I'm working on a speech about identity beliefs, something I'm probably going to take on the road in the winter time or maybe first part of next year. But it gets into, whether it's flat earth societies or the anti-vax communities or even religious beliefs, denominations or faith expressions, and how, there is a sense of social bonding that might actually trump the ideas themselves, right? The ideas may be important, but it's in many ways more important to belong. I mean, you get paid, you get that feeling of family, you get support and security. They've got your back. You feel superior as you do battle against the other. I'm interested in the social aspects of identity beliefs. You want to speak to that in more depth for just a second?
Yeah. So you mentioned like the flat earthers in particular. It's really fascinating too. I don't know if you've seen the documentary Behind the Curve.
I have, yes.
Okay, wonderful. The main character in that story, who is like the big guy in the flat earth community, you kind of see him throughout, and by the end, it's clear that he gets so much social reward from being not only in that group, but a member of that group that is able to articulate the best arguments for their position, that he gets rewarded for it. And that's really hard to give up. I personally have noticed that it is harder to disagree with my tribe on issues than it is to disagree with the other tribe. And I kind of feel like a coward when it comes to some of it, because there are things that I think my tribe aren't quite right on that I would like to speak out on, but I am scared, so I don't do it. That said, when you've got someone like flat earthers, I mean, that's really easy to mock, but the more someone is mocked for a belief, the more they're going to dig in. And actually, the part of their brain, brain scans show that the part of the brain that is activated when there's a physical threat is actually activated when it's a personal belief, a close identity belief is attacked in some way. When I cover this with my students, I play this fun game and I'll say, okay, how many species of elephants are there? Right? And you see, I don't know, most students have never thought about that, right? And they'll come up with an answer. I'm like, well, how sure are you, right? So proportionate again. How would you feel if you were wrong? I don't know. So I tell them there's 3 species of elephant, right? There's 2 species of African elephant now, and there's an Asian species of elephant. Okay, how do you feel that you're wrong? Nobody cares. And imagine feeling that same way about any of these identity beliefs, these beliefs that hold our social groups together. Imagine being told that one of those really foundational beliefs is wrong and caring just as much as you care about not knowing how many species of elephant there are. We would be able to change our minds. We'd be able to grow and align our beliefs with what's true. But instead, what we do is we attach our self-esteem and our group membership and our tribe self-esteem to those beliefs. And so we literally, tribe trumps truth. We care more about our social standing than we do about the truth.
It's interesting to me. I read an article a couple of years ago that was talking about our online interactions, because I can get my snark on, especially with the high profile players. I like going, or I think there is merit in going after the franchise players of awfulness, the people taking themselves way too seriously, doing a tremendous amount of damage. I like the idea of trying to knock them down a few pegs to let them know that many of us don't take them seriously. I handle the one-on-ones with the everyday interlocutor much, much differently. Maybe that's me rationalizing. I don't know. But I saw somebody and they were saying, especially online, all you have to do to feel like a good person these days is to broadcast a good opinion, right? All I have to do is go on Twitter and say some noble thing, and now I'm a good person. It seems like kind of a cheap way to achieve personal nobility. I might be an awful person in my regular life, the way I treat people, But if I'm out broadcasting my nobility, if I give you the correct opinion, that makes me a good person. And the internet is really, really fed into that model. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Yeah, we certainly portray ourselves differently online, or many of us do, than we are in real life. I will, the snark thing is funny because I try really, really hard not to be snarky, but every once in a while it gets the best of me. But more often, like I have a filter and I know how tired I am because it's how far down is that filter? Like it's sort of creaking, like
Like there's would they call that the id? I don't know. There's something deep down that wants to crawl out and literally crawl into the culture, but you have to repress it, right? You have to civilize yourself, Melanie, right?
do. And I try really hard. And I notice myself when I'm like, you know what, I can't hold this back anymore. And I'm about ready to hit send. And I'll know enough to say something to my husband and he'll go, you know what, why don't you wait till the morning to do that? Okay, that's probably fair. Because I know the snark makes me feel good. And I know there are times where the person that I'm giving the snark to, I think objectively deserves the snark. However, there's a whole mass of people who are watching and they are going to fall somewhere along the spectrum. And if they are more closely to the person that I might snark against, if that grammar was correct,
No, I got you.
if they're more closely tied to that, they're going to see that more as attack on them and I might lose them. So my goal is to hit the people in the middle that are probably just watching. They're spectators in this, and they're influenced by the behaviors and the arguments of the people. At least this is the optimist in me thinks this. And so by holding back the snark and by doing what I think is probably the more, say, grown-up Melanie way of dealing with it, hopefully I do more.
I've been working on myself. This is a little bit of a setup because I wanted to tell this story. But I've gotten weary. I've gotten weary because so little seems to come of it, especially when it comes to just regular people. Oh, I disagree with you. No, you're wrong. No, you're doubly wrong. Oh, yeah. Well, all my people say that they agree with me. Oh, yeah. My people disagree and they agree with me. Well, now I'm going to insult you more and I'm going to block you. And now I'm going to screenshot the block and I'm going to screenshot the block of the block. And I'm going to write a blog, response blog, video, response video. It's just insane. Only escalation, right? Only escalation. Nothing gets resolved. So I'd said something on my own social media page about something, and a public figure that I really admire jumped in and said something kind of snarky. He disagreed, and he came in and kind of nuked me from orbit, in not too bad a way, but he was definitely snarking. And I had that moment where I thought, I just want to go in and engage, right? I want to go in. I want to be snarky back. I want to be clever. I want people to tell me I'm clever. I want to get that payoff. But I did the same thing. Like I just took a breath and I said, all right. And because I've been working on myself, I'm in the middle of a journey and a process as to how I might improve some of how I operate. I decided I'm going to try something else. And I said, thanks for jumping in here. Please know my intent was not that. My intent actually is this, because I have legitimate concern. I love your work, by the way, and I appreciate you very much. You are smart and funny, and I will continue to be a fan. And I might be wrong on this. It won't be the first time I've been wrong, but just know this is my intent. This is where I came from. And when he finally reappeared, he didn't come back to up the ante. He didn't double down. Everything had de-escalated. And we began an exchange, which was productive and thoughtful and filled with goodwill, right? And I'll tell you, the payoff for that was a hell of a lot more intense than it was for me throwing out some zinger or shooting a meme his way. Instead, I really felt the rush. I still feel it now. It felt good to try to build that bridge. And then I thought, it is possible. And other people saw that it was possible. So I just wanted to tell that story. Maybe it's selfish to take up the airtime to provide that case study, Melanie, but that's where I'm at. Anyway.
No, that's brilliant. And back to when I know that my filter has worn down and I really shouldn't press reply or send. In the morning, I always feel better that I didn't. And when I have mustered the courage to be humble in public like that and demonstrate kindness in the face of someone who might have been a bit snarky at me, it always pays off in the end. And not just for myself, but I see it in other commenters as well.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying I'm perfect on this because I do like to get in there and stir the pot, especially with these high profile types. I mean, Superintendent of Public Education, Ryan Walters in Oklahoma, is just on my list. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's on my list, damn it. Okay, hang on. I want to talk about what I actually intended to talk about first. Joe Rogan, the most popular podcaster on Spotify. He's got like 11 million listeners for every freaking episode he does. Has RFK Jr. on. RFK Jr. running for president and is just a conspiracy nutbar. I mean, just wacky beliefs. He thinks that antidepressants are responsible for mass shootings. He thinks that the CIA was behind the assassination of JFK. And he's a big anti-vaxxer and he's got crazy ideas. And so Dr. Peter Hotez, who is an actual vaccine scientist, comes forward and says, beware, misinformation. He doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Joe Rogan says, oh, yeah, I will donate $100,000 to the charity of your choice if you will come on my show to debate RFK Jr. No time limit. You know, mano y mano. Let's have it out right here. And Dr. Hotez said, hell no. This is not the forum. If you want to talk personally, Joe, I'll give you my cell. I think he actually said that. I'll give you my number. We can have a conversation. But I'm not going to go and be a part of a circus. And people have come after Dr. Hotez, calling him a coward, right? You're afraid to debate. What are you afraid of? Why not present the information? So the reason I bring all this up is that you and I align on this. We don't think Dr. Hotez should step into that ring. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
And why?
Because that would not be a science debate. And let's be clear about this. So the word debate means different things to different people. Scientists are trained to debate. Right? Scientists, the process of science is a collection and evaluation of evidence as a community. You have to submit your findings to other researchers who have to try and check you. And they're all trying to prove each other wrong. It is cutthroat. Scientists do not like to agree. That's one of the main misconception, I think, of science I see is that people think that science is like a democracy, a groupthink, and nothing could be further from the truth. The way you make a name for yourself in science is to say, all of this evidence we have is wrong. And I know that because here's the evidence. Now, that is a science debate. What Rogan is after is one of those internet type debates where it's a no holds barred and it's who can defeat somebody else and beat them into submission. And that's not how science works. This issue has been debated in the scientific community, and Hotez is on the side of science. Rogan and Kennedy just want a platform to air conspiratorial and unsupported beliefs to a public who doesn't understand the difference. And this is one of my soapboxes. So if you just want to shut me up at some point, tell me to shut up.
I'll go.
So people don't understand how science works. And part of it, to my mind, comes from how we teach it. We teach science like, here's a scientific method, and it's a series of steps. And at the end, you did a science, and then you prove something to be true. And then here's all these facts that we've learned from science. And certainly there are interesting things that we've learned from the process of science. The scientific method does not work like that. There is no single scientific method. And so to present it that way is misleading at best. But also, science isn't a body of facts. We learn things from the process of science, but facts can change. I mean, when I was in college, Pluto was a planet. There was no such thing as epigenetics. There was 5 kingdoms instead of 3 domains and a series of kingdoms under them. Facts change. There's nothing set in stone about facts. Some of them are more supported than others and are much less likely to change. But the point of that is that all of that is a process of how we learn those things. That is the process of science and the process of scientists debating. So when the community comes out at the other end and says, here's what we know, here's my problem. Here's what we know is great, but we've now trained the public to think that what they know is set in stone. It's a series of facts. And over the pandemic in particular, we all saw the process of science play out in real time. We had a new virus. We had a new vaccine. We had a set of shifting recommendations based on that science, right? Science is what do we know, and then what should we do with it? That's policy. And good policy should be based on science. But all of that was shifting as we learned. And none of us are perfect, right? What we're trying to do is get to a better outcome in the end. But then people felt like science was always changing their mind. Which is a good thing, and of course they do. They'll say, well, they're not sure. Well, you know what? We're never really 100% confident about everything. But the public didn't understand any of that. And worse, I think because they didn't understand the process of science, and the pandemic got politicized so early that people went back to their tribes. They went back to the group that they trusted the most. And unfortunately, once it becomes politicized, then your identity becomes attached to it. It's much less harder to change your mind, like we just talked about. So if we're talking about having a debate, I personally would love to see scientists do a better job of communicating to the public what science is. As science educators, I think we could do a better job of helping our students understand how the process of science works. But the whole point is epistemology. It is, how do we know what we know? And what I would like to see, even if, I don't think this would be appropriate for Kennedy and for Hotez, but the better question is, how does science know what it knows about vaccines? That, I think, is a much better conversation to have than here's all the evidence. Because what you have is people finding sides based on who they trust. And unfortunately, some people have put their trust in places that do not deserve it.
Well, I think one of the big concerns that I have, and many have, is that kind of theater often lends itself to style over substance. I mean, if Dr. Hotez goes in and gets into the minutia, right, of how vaccines work, and blah, 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 and he starts to go down the tier of layers into the history of vaccines and how everything's peer-reviewed and tested and blah, 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 and people are just going to wink out, right? I mean, they're not tuning into Joe Rogan because they're ready for a deep science lecture. They want theater, right? They want to see an MMA match in some ways. And so then RFK Jr. is able to just smooth talk and sell and do his thing. And if you look at it only at the surface level, he might come off like he won. And I just don't know if that's plus I hate the whole baiting thing, debate me or else. Here's some money. I'll put it up for grabs. Are you a coward? What are you afraid of? That kind of thing, really. I see it on my channel. I'll get theists to, drop me a line and say, debate me, coward. I'm like, is this how someone approaches someone else in good faith to have a conversation about the things that matter? I just don't buy it. I don't think that Rogan is the forum for this kind of discussion.
Yeah, I mean, in the process of science, scientists are taught to argue. So a good argument for a scientist is going to be different than something that you'd probably hear on Rogan. And that gets back to the nature of debate. A debate in Rogan's terms is a shouting match where, no holds barred. There's ad hominems and straw men and red herrings and, fallacies galore. Whereas in Hotez's world, those kinds of things aren't tolerated. They're not valid responses to an argument. And so it's not even that's not even debating. And so scientists are taught to do that as opposed to doing what Rogan is doing. One more thing there, which is that scientists are taught to be dispassionate. you don't want to attach your identity to your beliefs because you're trying to prove yourself wrong, right? You have to subject your findings to other people. It is not fun, but it gets to a better outcome. Ironically, I see a lot of, and I'm stereotyping here, but the logic bros who are always calling for these kinds of debates and so on, like to talk about how, well, facts don't care about your feelings, and you just need to be more logical about this. When in reality, the emotional side in this is Rogan's side. It is not Hotez's side. And in a debate between these two, that's why somebody like Kennedy might win, is playing to emotions. You may not realize it. And the more you are in denial about the role of your emotions in your thought processes, the more susceptible you are to them. That's how Kennedy is going to win, as opposed to Hotez's side.
Well, it's also talk about an example of personal. And we've got everybody online who's gone after this good man who's committed decades of his life to science. It's very Fauci-esque, the way they've gone after him, vilified him. Now they're making accusations that he's just he's making shillionaire bucks for big pharma. All right, he's worth a ton of money and therefore he's not credible. You've addressed those on the Thinking is Power pages, have you not?
Yeah, I have. And, I half joked with my husband recently, like, hey, kids, go in science. Look how well you'll be treated by the
Hey, when I think about it, a 7-figure, 8-figure income, science is normally not the first field that comes to mind.
Oh my God. And the scientists that I know are like driving Hondas and they're paying off student loans, right? And there's a few scientists that have made some money, to be sure. But yeah, so about a week ago, what came out was that Hotez was worth $35 million. And it's from a site that I've been waiting for it to be fact checked and I haven't seen it. The claim has only come from one site that doesn't seem to be a reliable site. But even if we say that's true, so are we saying that because somebody is worth $35 million, they're not trustworthy? Okay, well, I checked and Kennedy is worth at least 50 million and Rogan is worth like 120 million. So are they not credible because they are worth more money? So the standards don't seem to apply equally to all sides in this debate here.
Well, we've also got people showing up at poor Dr. Hotez's front door. The people just showing up at his house. And I don't get it. Like, when did this become such a personal thing? I would feel threatened if somebody was, on my property after being called out in front of the world by arguably the planet's most popular podcaster. I mean, it all seems like it's a powder keg that could blow up at any moment.
Yeah, it's really heartbreaking. And quite frankly, I mean, this is anecdotal, but I don't know if there's any studies to document this. I know a lot of scientists and they have folders of hate mail and death threats. I mean, obviously what's happening to Hotez is an extreme version, as was what happened to Fauci, but it's not uncommon. I saw recently, actually, there's a weatherman a meteorologist in Iowa that just resigned because he was getting death threats and it was giving him, PTSD.
Why would a meteorologist be getting death threats?
Because he talked about climate change.
I see. Let me play devil's advocate. Why not go on one of the biggest forums in the world and, you've practiced, you've got cue cards, you've formatted the information for the general public. Why not go and at least present the case? I mean, is there a situation where you think somebody who was a science communicator and a vaccine proponent could go on just in every platform like that and be effective?
Honestly, I don't see how. So part of that is it would require a moderator that absolutely makes people adhere to the rules involved. And so far, that seems like it would be Rogan. And I don't think Rogan has the wherewithal to be able to do that, especially since he certainly has a side in this debate. And so there would need to be rules and a moderator. But Hotez has gone online. Like, it's not like he hasn't been public, right? He's gone on podcasts. He's been interviewed by news programs. He is trying to get the science-based message out to the public. So it's not like he's being secretive. He's just not willing to play in the mud. I'm reminded of that. Like, don't play chess with a pigeon because they're going to shit all over the board and assume they won.
So you wouldn't do it? I mean, come on, somebody right now, Melanie from Thinking is Power. I'm calling you out. I want you on my show, and we're going to debate whatever you and I disagree with. You would always say no?
Well, I certainly don't feel like I have the expertise to debate vaccines. So I suppose it might depend on what area it is that we're talking about. And I don't know, is my check in the mail? Because I get called a lot and my check never shows up.
No, I hear it as like I don't know where you fall religiously. I'm not here for that, but like I'm an ex-evangelical, and so one of the many tactics that people use to try to discredit the witness when it comes to me is he does this for a living, or he's selling books that he has authored. Therefore, if he receives revenue, his interests are completely self-serving. Therefore, he is not credible. And I just stare blankly at these people. Like, they love their pastors, even the mega pastors, the Joel Osteen types who are worth $1 squillion. Or this idea that if you can find a way to make a living doing what you love, you are automatically a shill. Like, do they say professional athletes are fake, or professional musicians are fake, or professional poets, authors, dramatists, actors, they don't love what they do? They're not true believers. I mean, I don't know if you do Thinking is Power full time, or if you're a teacher part time, or what. But I mean, if you could be about thinkingispower.com 24/7, would that discredit you as someone who wants rational thinking in a more reasonable world? I don't think so, Melanie. I just don't.
Yeah, I think it's a really easy way to make yourself feel like you've won an argument. The reason I bring up the net worth of like Rogan and Kennedy is because, like you mentioned with the pastor, that kind of argument always tends to be one-sided. Like, it applies to you, but it doesn't apply to me. And scientists have decades of schooling and experience, and we expect professionals to get paid for what you do. I mean, if you're a plumber, do you expect to not get paid when you go to a house call, right? Does that mean that you're like some sort of biased for plumbing? This only seems to apply, though, to issues where scientific findings, which we all know are inherently reliable. We understand that science is reliable, which is why so many people try to justify their opinions with science. But when science conflicts with a core belief, something that's really important to us, then that gets our defensiveness up. And we need to find a way to make ourselves feel justified for rejecting those scientific findings. So
I'm sorry, forgive me, Melanie. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about a comedian, and I don't believe this, but the joke made me laugh out loud. He said, if I actually do make $20 million, you're going to know, because I'll be in Palm Springs with my new friends, right? This idea that you and I are cashing in it's obviously they're trying to discredit the witness rather than deal with the points that are being presented and disagreed with. I worry that we live in a world where disagreement it's a respectful disagreement is considered weakness. I don't want to live in the same world as those people. I'm not going to give quarter to those people. But I don't think that's how we change the world. I don't think, hey, you're an idiot. Hey, you're a moron. Hey, fuck you, or whatever. I don't think that's how we change the world. But I see a lot of it because I think people write other people off completely. You are unreachable. Now, I want to tell you another personal anecdote. This is dirty laundry, but this is where I am, Melanie. I'm like an abused partner when it comes to my religious mother. And every couple of years I unblock, and we have a casual relationship that then escalates into judgment and shame. And then I have enough and I block, sorry. I don't know why I keep going back, this time it'll be different, right? I'm sure there's good in there somewhere. And so it has happened again. I look at my evangelical 84-year-old zealot of a parent and think, I've written her off. Like, I think she is unreachable. So I'm guilty of that. Do you think there are some people in this world where there's no hope? Why bother? Do you ever get there?
Well, yeah, I think those are two separate questions. Thank you for sharing that story. That's really hard.
Oh, it's kind of self-serving, I guess. I mean, I don't know what people want to know what goes on in my life, but it's as a host, it's a personal struggle that may relate to other people going through familial stuff and emotional blackmail and boundary violations. And so I really share it in that way because I know many people can relate, and not just when it comes to religion, but when it comes to life choices and identity and everything else. So, but I mean, sometimes you and I have to look at people and go, no hope, next. And I'm guilty of that, right?
Yeah. So I think that I would like to think that no person is unreachable. However, I think there are people who aren't reachable by what I have the ability or what I am wanting to give. And that line falls in different places for different people. If you know me, my husband is Black. And when we got married, I lost family members. And it was a battle that we tried to fight. And for some people, it was just not worth keeping them in our lives. And you have to make that decision for, at least this is what I tell myself, it wasn't worth the effort to keep them in my life. For a random stranger, when I see somebody online posting anti-vax conspiracy theories, they're not worth my time at all. So it depends on the situation and the relationship. I would like to think, though, that those people still are reachable. I'm just not willing to do it.
Maybe I can call your family and then I'll give you my mom's cell number. Maybe we can swap. Maybe that's it. We just come from different perspectives, different contexts. But you're right. I mean, I think I may not be able to reach someone that's maybe someone else could. Maybe it's someone from a different perspective who is less threatening or there's less baggage. I buy that. That seems intuitive. Any final thoughts about thinking is power for our audience here? That I just love your stuff. I'm not trying to minimize it, but it's fun to look at, and it's easily digestible, and it's really taps into the humanity, the why we believe what we believe, and it doesn't lead with disdain for the sheeple, but instead says, we're all people, we're navigating our way. Let's find a way to, get opportunities, create opportunities for changing minds, even our own. Did I just sell your site for you after I asked you what it was, Melanie? I mean, I don't know. That's what I do.
I don't know. I don't think I could do any better than that.
Yes, you can. What is thinking is power, and what resources do you have as we punctuate the conversation here?
Well, thinking is power came from my work as an educator. I teach science at a community college, and non-major science, importantly. So these are people who don't want to be scientists when they grow up. And I was teaching them science the old way, like biology, and here's all the things you need to memorize. And I finally realized that was not a good use of their time. And so I created a course instead to teach these skills and teach them how to think. And in the process, what I found was, again, how we think and how we know what we know and why science is reliable is more important than the findings of science. Because implicit in that process, if you understand how biased we are and how irrational we are and emotional and so on, then the logic of the process of science falls in place. Like, we can't understand why we need science until we understand how biased we are. But the other thing is, there's a lot of misinformation that science classes hopefully would address. Things like climate change denial or evolution denial or the safety of GMOs or the safety of vaccines. And those issues, like we've talked about, tend to be important identity issues. They're things that are emotional, that maybe are tribal for my students. And if I come in with one of those issues, then they're going to get defensive. So what I realized is I need to start with something that's not triggering. And so I teach them first, like we baby step into the water, right? We wade into the shallow end where we do like witches and ghosts and UFOs and astrology and that kind of thing. And we move on to the more important things as we go. But I'm teaching them the process of how to think, what good evidence looks like, what a logical argument looks like. And so that when they get to those issues, they've had the practice to do so. And then when I put it online, I just kind of thought, well, maybe people would be interested. And since then, I've realized that reaching people is fun. And please, if you follow me, I really appreciate you. But I really think a way to help us address our issue is to improve how we teach science. And so I'm doing more work with educators. Like if you get one educator, you get all of their students, and so on and so on. So I'm trying to do more of my work moving forward with educators as well.
You know, we like to think we're all immune from bias. Those other people, they're deluded. Like our thinking is pure. There was a great comic or political cartoon that you posted. This is a few days ago where you see a husband and wife sitting on the couch. I think they're watching the news. And the man says, it's interesting how it's the people who disagree with me who are all victims of bias or something like that. We don't like to think that we can be biased or wrong, but it's a great reminder that we're all human, for better and for worse, hopefully usually for better. But it's always good to realize that we might be wrong. And it's good to know if we're wrong, even if it stings. Melanie Trecek-King, you are amazing. And I appreciate you chatting with me again. I'll link to thinkingispower.com in the description box. And let's talk again soon, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much.